Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube. Back with another episode of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast. This is episode number 231, and with me, as will always be, from here and forever forward, forth shall, or something of that nature, I have my two esteemed colleagues and co-hosts. First of all, Mr. Towmaster99. How you doing, Tow?
I'm doing well, thank you. That sounds very permanent, the way you said that. Or stuck here forever.
It is until the next change, until the next drum beat drops. Mr. DBQ, how are you?
Purgatory.
From here to eternity, right? Excellent. No, I'm glad to be here. I am appreciating Tao's Scribblenauts DC t-shirt that he's wearing. So,
Villains. Or mostly villains.
Yeah, right. But I think it looks like in the Scribblenaut style, is it?
Yeah, it looks like a Scribblenauts style, yeah.
Yep.
All right, well, hopefully we will get through tonight, but right off the bat, we're starting with, I don't know whether or not this is a misspelling in the agenda or whether or not I simply don't know the pronunciation. If you're unfamiliar with our new format, we're back to mostly talking about games. And if we hit on news, it will predominantly be if there is anything in the new gaming news cycle that is directly attributable, tightly coupled, adjacent to a game that we are playing. So let's start right off with segment one, our new releases. And the man of the hour who has played the new releases, or any new releases in the most recent week, has been Mr. DBQ.
So they're not quite new, but they're new for us, right? So I played two games, both released a few weeks ago. Voice of Cards, the follow-up, Forbidden Maiden. So this is Square, this is Yoko Taro's, this is the card RPG that came out. Voice of Cards, The Isle Dragon Roars came out last fall, kind of quickly announced and released. And only 3 months later, at the end of February, we got Voice of Cards, Forbidden Maiden. Separate story, kind of set in the same world, using kind of the same dynamics and gameplay. And I'm actually really enjoying it. But it is the concept, the conceit of it's a RPG. It's grindy, but it is all done through cards. Your characters are cards. You move around on a board. Your battles happen, and it's a turn-based battle, but basically you have cards. You have mana to spend or gems to spend. So there's some strategy there. There's some card battling elements to it. And it is all kind of in a wrapper of you're playing it on a deck, and there's a game master who's narrating things to you, and that's done really well. It's one of the biggest features that this new sequel has from the original is that there's a fast forward motion, or there's a fast gameplay, fast speed versus normal speed. And I'm probably 8 hours in, and for the first couple hours I played on normal speed, and I kept thinking, I just wish I had a button press to skip through all these combat animations, which are interesting and well done from an animation style, but also just take a lot of time, because the game is also kind of grindy, that I thought, I don't really have to grind, but my compulsive nature of the board, the landmass or the ocean that you're exploring, are cards that are flipped over, and as you come closer to them, they flip over and reveal themselves. So in true kind of civilization that need to clear out all the fog of war on the map mentality, that I ended up grinding to some degree, and even in grinding, some of the boss battles got kind of tough. But they're, in a good RPG, that's part of what you do. So then turning it on to fast forward motion, fast speed, everything just zips along. Your movement is much faster. And again, I'm playing on a PlayStation 5, so the loading speeds are nice. I haven't really had to worry about, this is also out on PC, Xbox, PlayStation 4, Switch. The transition screens, I think the momentum of I haven't played the demo of the Switch version, or the original had a demo for the Switch version. And I'm curious on how the loading screens transition, because it is a game that feels like it should move pretty quickly, because you are kind of flipping through cards and going, and having kind of the slow transitions or even the loading screens really kind of kills momentum. And not that this is, I played probably 6 hours over the past weekend, and I kept thinking this would be a really good podcast game. Like, it is, because everything is, it's all read to you, but it's also, I have the subtitles on, and it's all the dialogue is on the cards as well. So you could play it. The sound is great. I mean, that part is very enjoyable. It's very relaxing because you're out on kind of a sea voyage, but it also is something where it works very well with something else running in the background. And as much as I'm enjoying it, and I'll probably keep playing through it, because it is actually a really interesting story in a true Yoko Taro. Again, this is near Automata fashion. He's the designer of this. It has kind of a cheery kind of JRPG fantasy trappings to it, but underneath is a lot of tragedy and melancholy, and so there's a lot more layers in the story than the cheeky main characters give credence to. So that in itself is, I'm actually really interested in playing the story. In some ways, I wish it was on iPad. I wish it was on, phones. It's something where you could play a few, because it's card based. It's something where you could play a few rounds. So I think if it runs fine on Switch, it would be a very enjoyable Switch game. One of the things that there's not, the fast speed is not in the original Isle Dragon Roars. So that was one of the complaints of that game, is that it does kind of slow things down. It also seems like potentially that's something that could be patchable now that they've figured it out. And it's basically the same game engine as well. So Voice of Cards, Forbidden Maiden, just a nice kind of classic grinding JRPG. Not too emotionally investing, after leaning forward in my chair to play a lot of other games, it's nice to have something that just kind of is relaxing and gives you the chance to just kind of go on the journey of it. So,
yeah, I'm sorry, I might have missed this at the beginning, but how did you find out about this game?
So I knew about the first one, the Voice of Cards.
Oh, okay. So you played
Isle Dragon Roars. I had read about it, heard stuff on the podcast, and liked the idea. I mean, I enjoy a card-based game without necessarily having to go through all the deck building aspects of it. And so I was very interested in it. The story itself just didn't really drag me in. It was very kind of high fantasy, kind of nights out adventuring, but you were the unlucky people. You were the down on their luck people who were always chasing after the heroes, which is actually kind of a cool conceit. But so when this came around, it was also in the fall when there was a whole lot else going on and to play. And hearing about this and coming so soon, I was very curious on what the difference was. And I really, So it was something I had on my radar. And when the surprise sequel came, it was an easy pickup.
So you mentioned this was back in the game came out back in the fall when there was a lot to play, but there's also a lot to play now. I mean, February has kind of become like the new holiday season of the gaming release cycle. So I'm just curious, how are you? What made you decide to fit something like this in, which is not a cozy game, but is definitely a thinking game, more of a kind of a turn-based kind of strategy type of game with a slower do loop than something like a Horizon Forbidden West or Elden Ring or something like that?
Sure. What was it? Middle of third week of February that Game Pass came out with Edge of Eternity, which was a small studio, started with 4 guys, went up to 13. It kind of a very traditional kind of JRPG. and played some of that, enjoyed it. You could see the fact that it was kind of created by a small team, but it got my palate wet again for some JRPG. And the fact that I own Horizon Zero Dawn and have never finished it did not give me no reason to rush into Forbidden West. I'm not a Souls-like fan in terms of the gameplay and the loop there, so it was another game that I wasn't super eager to pick up in terms of Elden Ring. So yes, there were lots of big releases. I found myself going down a side path because of where my interests were in the moment.
Yeah, man, it's quiet time. I get that. So, Swiss and I played a game last year, having problems struggling to remember the title. Dungeon something or other.
Explorer? Is it Dungeon
it.
Explorer?
That may have been it.
Yes. It came out around the same time as this, and it was kind of those kind of minimalist square offshoots, where that was a very kind of minimalist RPG kind of pulled down to just the bare bones type of thing.
Yeah, so are you going to be checking that out as well by chance?
At some point, maybe, right? I mean, we'll see. This is supposed to be, the campaign's like 20 to 25 hours. So by the time I get done with that, we'll see how eager I am to jump back into another RPG after that. But it's been a while. You know, this time last year, I made my way through all of Mass Effect Andromeda. It's this kind of February, March time where I'm eager to kind of dig into something.
Yeah, it's the off season. Time to train. I get it. So you may not be getting into Dungeon Encounters, but you have been playing something else that is very dungeony. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so on the PC, so I had seen this game when it was, again, in one of the, Steam demo preview things that they do throughout the year. This is Super Dungeon Maker by Fire Chick. It is a studio out of Germany. When Mario Maker came out and lots of people were saying, okay, so where's the Zelda Maker? This is basically a Zelda Maker, or at least it's a Zelda Dungeon Maker. And it is in kind of a high-res 16-bit type of graphics. Instead of a little plucky green boy or green clad boy, you are a chicken with a sword and a shield. It works, sure. But it is very much like you are. It's pulling things out of A Link to the Past, Minish Cap, in that kind of 16-bit Zelda's design. And it introduces a few things. It is all community based for the most part. There are probably 3 dungeons, at least that I've encountered so far, that are kind of built into the game that introduce you to a number of different concepts, gives you an introduction to the different enemies, the different type of blocks and puzzles that you can create. And then you can either explore community created content where at this point, it came out the end of February. It came out the same week as the Steam Deck. So the end of February, which is also kind of why I was like, I'm not getting a Steam Deck yet, but this game I was interested in, and it definitely seems like playing it on a handheld feels fitting with that kind of Zelda Link to the Past type of aspect. It controls well. It controls pretty well. How about that? I am not in love with the combat in it, but the Zelda 16-bit combat can kind of be a little bit finicky anyways in terms of if you're lined up in the right direction to hit the enemy. So it's responsive. It is also, people can be devious. Wow. Cause it's community created content. So there's hundreds, they're pushing 1,000 different levels that have been created so far. Some of them are, themed around different characters and, recreations of different things. Some are heavy on combat. Some are heavy on puzzles. So I tried some of the most kind of highly downloaded ones, and they are pretty high level. I mean, some of them are very complex. There's a lot of different, creating in like a traditional Zelda 16-bit level or 8-bit, you've got multiple layers on the dungeon. You've got, puzzles to unlock a door to get a key, or defeat all the enemies to then open the door to get to the next board. Again, this is that kind of traditional map grid-based Zelda dungeon. And yeah, it's got shield, it's got a roll, you've got a little bit of a couple other special abilities that can come in. I've played around slightly with the maker aspect. It's in that same kind of tile setting that Mario Maker is in. So it's relatively user friendly. It's an early access right now, so this is why I say relatively user friendly. It needs a lot more. It could benefit from some more pop-ups in terms of what the different like stats are on this type of enemy, or what the attacks are, or the, giving you a little more information regarding the types of blocks or the types of kind of environments that you are creating as you're laying down the tiles. So I think there's a really interesting core game there in terms of what gets created. The fact that it is at this point only single player stuff. I mean, it's all that it is only community based stuff. It means that there's not you've kind of got to go out and find your own fun. If people enjoyed Mario Maker or, crafting and building within other types of games, there's a lot of potential for enjoyment here. I say that because I can see and appreciate what it's doing. I think what I'm realizing after playing a couple hours of it is the thing I really enjoy about a Zelda game is not so much the dungeons, but the exploration of the overworld. Like, I want to discover the dungeons. I want to figure out the map. I want to get in all the, kind of explore that rather than the puzzle solving aspects. And so having this distilled down to simply nothing but dungeon after dungeon is enjoyable, or has been enjoyable in small bursts. But after 45 minutes of kind of making my way through a dungeon or trying a couple different dungeons, I feel like that would be the time when you get back out to the overworld and get a chance to, stretch a little bit and go explore without feeling in the confines and tension of a dungeon.
So I don't say this to castigate you at all, but I say it to bring up a nit of a conversational piece. The game's called Super Dungeon Maker. So hyper-focusing on dungeons, do you feel... I mean, so where I would break ways with this developer is if there was some incorrect messaging in things that they've written, like on their Steam page, that would lead you to believe... I mean,
they are making Zelda dungeons, right? That is very clear from the very beginning of their Steam page. So yeah, no, I think that is, it is less about the game and more about what I'm realizing about what I enjoy out of a Zelda game, or that ebb and flow that makes me enjoy a Zelda game feels different when it is simply just dungeons. And that doesn't make it bad. It is pretty creative, and people, just like in Mario Maker, we saw people do kind of amazing, crazy, unheard of things, and the potential is out there for people to really dig in and play around with the expectations of players going into a Zelda dungeon.
Now, did you play Deep Rock Galactic?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, we played that together, the three of us, one night.
Well, so, I mean, I guess maybe it's a loaded question. I should have maybe shaped it up.
Did I play more of it? No, I played a little bit of it, but not much more.
Okay, all right. So I wonder if you had... So Deep Rock Galactic, I feel like, is a dungeon crawler. I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from. I have had my episodes and instances of playing the Metro games, and there's a point where that claustrophobic feeling of like the limited field of view, being underneath the mask, and being in just a constantly inherently pitch black environment, except for the distance in front of you that you can shine your flashlight for hours and hours at a time, like just gets to a point where like, I don't need this tonight. Like, really great game, really love it. Great implementation, high graphical fidelity. There's a certain point where like the weight of that game pressing down on me just gets overbearing. But it's not a part of the point. It's not a... It could... I mean, there's a conversational vector where I could talk about the design of that game and whether or not there's a little too much of that in and in the way Metro Exodus improves upon that because it moves you to a lot of outdoor environments. But that's a game that deliberately presents the options of heterogeneous environments, right? It's not this like here's where we are. Whereas Deep Rock Galactic, it seems like from a design ethos is similar to this in that it's everywhere you go, you're going into a mine, right? Like there's no option. Like that is the entire point of the game.
Maybe different colors, but they're still kind of in that same,
But they do it in a way that it doesn't. There's a certain degree of that kind of claustrophobia after a little while, but there are different design elements in the game. There's increased instances of lighting. There are opportunities where you can see more of the cave, at once, and so you don't. It's not a Diablo kind of thing where like. Once you go into the dungeon, you can only see 6 hexes out beyond you, right, forever.
Well, and this is bright, colorful graphics. You're playing a rooster, right? So it is not oppressive in that same way, but yes, right? Like even though I can see the board, it's still. Again, this is a personal thing. This is not about the game, but there is, and I can totally see it in Metro where you do get that claustrophobia. Yeah.
All right. Well, anything to add on that, or Tao? Did you have any questions about Super Dungeon Maker?
No, I did not.
All right. Well, let's move on to talk. Let's move on to the next segment, our regular rundown, where we talk about everything else we have been playing that was not necessarily a new release. And let's move on to a game that does put you in a lot of outdoor environments. Max Payne on the PC, the original. I have a lot. Look, one of my great failings as a gamer is that I often, tell people, I warn people, in conversation, look, I play games a lot, I do a podcast, but I don't get emotionally tethered to things, right? If for anybody who's read my blog post about, like, I never get involved with a game that I can't walk away from in 30 seconds or less, right? That great line from Heat. Like, if Halo Infinite had come out and bombed, I love the Halo franchise, but I wouldn't have been sobbing in my bedroom, right? I would have said, fifth, sixth iteration of a gaming franchise was a flop, no big deal, we'll move on and I'll go find something else to play, right? Xbox has a bad year or doesn't have games, as some PlayStation fans like to say. I'm like, whatever. Like, it's an operating system, it's a platform, I enjoy playing on it, I play whatever's on it, I don't have to have first-party exclusives or bangers, every X increment of time in order for me to feel justified. But Max Payne is one of those few rare releases, maybe the only one, that I actually became aware of when it was in development pipeline, tracked it, understood what was going on, played the demo when it came out, and then actually bought the game on day one. Very rare instance for me, for all of the it's a day one buy kind of rhetoric that goes around today. Like, it's just, I don't do that often. I don't care and get emotionally invested as much. Max Payne, though, has had a difficult time on Steam since the days of Windows 98 Second Edition. It has not fared well as new versions of Windows have come out, and basically forever since it's shown up on Steam, it has had an endemic audio and graphics presentation problem when it goes into those kind of comic book, noir comic book kind of page panels and that narration. That is a huge part of the game. That is like playing Metal Gear Solid without the Otacon segments in between, right? Like, you could almost say, I mean, I'm not going to say it's more of a reason to play the game than bullet time, but it's fairly close, and I'd almost say that it's equal. I have, over the last decades, tried all of the various forms of, like, the patches and the mods, and I'm not a big guy on the mod scene. I like to buy a game, even though I've moved to digital. I like to buy the game, download the thing, install it. I expect it to run as advertised, right? I don't, with the exception of Falcon 4.0, which is the only another game that is near and dear to my heart, I don't do a lot of hunting and pecking around the internet to find things to make things work beyond, one or two things. I don't hack my registry file, right, to make a game run. And so I've never been successful at getting Max Payne to run since it has been offered for sale on Steam. There's another conversational vector where I would like to discuss exactly how the heck Valve and Remedy get away with that, selling a game that is inherently broken and never addressing it or fixing it. But I'd seen a news story that I thought had said that like Remedy had released a new version or a patch or something. I was like, maybe the game's playable now. So I went and pulled it down again and tried it, and it didn't work. This time, however, and maybe it's been there for a while, and I just hadn't, come across it or hadn't noticed it or hadn't found it or whatever, there is a thing called the Fix It All patch. And it's a series of patches that comes down in a selectable library of, you can select which one to install. They recommend that you just install the whole thing and say that will fix all the problems 90% of the time. But in the instance where you don't, you can go in and try and select some different combination of files until you find one that works. I pulled the whole thing down, installed the whole thing, everything started working. Now again, I go back to, I'm not a person who gets very emotionally invested with games, but like when I heard, when I got to like the first splash page, after you load the game and it kind of plays the opening cinematic, and you get to the first menu screen, and I waited for a few seconds because when you play the game natively, at least when I play the game natively from Steam, and it goes to that menu screen, it's absolute silence. When I sat on that screen for a few seconds and I heard that film noir piano theme come on, that is like all represents everything that Max Payne is to me, I seriously got a little misty-eyed. And then I started the game up, and all the comic book panels came up, and I was just, like, in heaven. This is probably, honestly, my last time through playing this game, and I've played it in the past, even without the comic book panels. I've never finished it in that state, because it's just, like, halfway through it, I'm like, I just don't know what the point is of playing this. But this is probably my last time through, probably because I feel like, hey, I've rolled the dice, and I've finally gotten this thing to work, and I don't know that I'm going to go through that torture again. But, it's at the point now where just kind of from muscle memory, like, I remember rooms and I know where the bad guys are. And it's, it's back before the days of, like, procedural generation of, like, where enemies are going to pop up. So it's just, you go into the room, the guy's going to be over on the right. You immediately, bullet time, dive to the left and, like, take him down. So there's a lot of kind of repetitive muscle memory now in tactical situations of where I know exactly what's going to happen. I've got pain pills out the wazoo. It's not the challenge that it used to be anymore, and I'm just not the person who's gonna, feel a great feel of fun or return on investment from like completing the plain Jane vanilla difficulty level and then unlocking, the New York Minute difficulty level. But for the moment in time that I'll live in it, and again, it's a short game. I should say, Max Payne is my favorite game of all time. Like, I've spent years of my life where people ask that question, and I struggle, and I'm trying to figure it out. I struggled for a while with movies. I finally landed on Last of the Mohicans and The Princess Bride. Those are my two favorite movies. It's taken me longer to kind of settle down on what game it is, and I'll probably pick like a near second for what favorite game of all time. But absolutely, undoubtedly, one of the top two is Max Payne. It's only a 6.5 to 8.5 hour experience, but it is just living in a John Woo movie. With all the cheese. You have to accept the cheese, right? But you also have to understand, like, the film noir, like, cultural movement and what that's about, and understand how that title plays that perfectly, right? And once you buy into that, you can grasp onto the story and realize what you're living through, much less if you talk about, like, the provenance of the Max Payne franchise out through, the additional titles. But that has been what I've been doing.
I'm just appreciating that you built a giant rig, super powerful, and your test for it is what, 2002's Max Payne? So, but yeah, that's great. And I love the emotional connection that you have and the way you describe it. As a film noir fan, I appreciate what Max Payne does within that. And the fact that I'm so thankful for Steam Workshop that has added so much to so many games, that going back to older games where the community has bolstered them through Steam Workshop is great. So to hear that experience is commendable.
I am getting 240 frames per second, so that should at least set. That's right. The funny thing is the hilarious thing is I'm actually not playing that on the new rig. I'm actually playing that on an old rig that I'm still running in the house that runs an RTX 2070. So.
Oh, okay. Still, I mean, compared to what the Pentium 3 that it would have been running at the time.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I first played that game on like a Dell, a Dell Inspiron laptop before they bought Alienware that had like a 4 megabyte like ATI Radeon card in it or something like that. Back when they were ATI before they were bought by AMD. So good times and good memories. But yeah, it was a good time. I will probably definitely proceed on to play Max Payne 2 from here. And I have actually never played Max Payne 3, which was published by Rockstar, wasn't it?
Yep,
Yeah.
developed by Rockstar. Yeah.
So I may go back and revisit that. Does Rockstar who owns the IP now? Does Rockstar own the IP or Remedy?
Oh, I have to check and see if Remedy came back around, like purchased it again after things got better. But Rockstar did own it at the time. That's how they ended up with kind of Max Payne 3 not being done by Remedy.
Right. But I mean, in an era where we're rebooting and revisiting so many franchises, and there's rumors of Rockstar working on a Bully 2, like what a great title that would be to revisit. Speaking of revisiting, I have also been revisiting Prey by Arcane Studios, another game that I strangely have maybe not an emotional connection to, but definitely kind of sort of a nostalgic one. I played the original Prey from 2006, I think the original Prey was, which I think I have a hard time remembering. Maybe it was a 3D Realms game or some other developer, but I actually liked the original Prey. I was very hyped to hear when Bethesda landed the Prey IP after, I think, the THQ dissolution. But then was surprised when they said that they were going to use the branding, but it was going to be a complete pivot into something different. And then it went to Arcane Studios, and then I heard the rumblings that it was going to be kind of a spiritual, not successor, but kind of built in the mold of System Shock 2, which is one of my favorite PC games of all time, because it was a game that was kind of in the zeitgeist at the time that I got into PC gaming in terms of building my own PCs. So I played the original. I originally played 2017 Prey on the PlayStation 4, I guess the PlayStation 4 Pro. And since I've transitioned to all PC all the time, and the game is now on Game Pass, it was an opportunity to go back and revisit it. So, having a great time with obviously the, in my opinion, improved control scheme of using mouse and keyboard. It's kind of funny how, I think I mentioned this maybe last week when I briefed my original foray into Prey. That one of the funny shifts in the 4.5, 5 years since is that those initial stages, when I would see a mimic just like materialize like having been a trash can or something, I would flip out, and now they are just an enemy to be beaten and bludgeoned. So it's a different approach. It feels a little less creepy time than it did the first time through, and it's more, and maybe that's just from having had a taste of Deathloop and kind of a few years hence now kind of being a little more grounded and intuitively aware of kind of what an Arcane Studios kind of design pattern looks like from a game implementation. But nonetheless, I'm still having a great time. I had that step out moment on the Talos space station where you come out into the major observation deck and you kind of see the entirety of the space station, and then turn the corner and see some of the hatches blow, which you could see through one of the observation deck windows. And you kind of had, again, one of those Oblivion, Skyrim, Fallout kind of moments that Bethesda talks about kind of seeing where the game is going from a grand scale. It also helps, kind of coming back into the beginning of it the second time through and just understanding, while it's at a faster pace, that it still kind of has some of that run and fetch, back and forthism of a Resident Evil kind of game, which I talked about last week, that it's, go to this wing and go to this wing and find your objective, go to a different wing to find the ID card, then come back to that same wing so that you can actually investigate the thing, which gives you access to yet another wing. So it's just this complete crisscross back and forth of going, from one thing to the other. So a little less harsh of a grind, on me mentally, knowing that that's coming around the corner. DBQ, you have also, is Madden 22 on EA Play Game Pass?
Yeah, so the week after the Super Bowl, maybe 2 weeks now, Madden 22 came out on Game Pass. So I'm a sucker for diving back into sports games when they become relevant within the media. I went back to NBA 2K during All-Star Weekend. I also downloaded Super Mega Baseball 3, which also came to Game Pass through EA Play. Now with all the wonderful collective bargaining negotiations going on with Major League Baseball. But Super Mega Baseball 3, which was a great game when it came out last year, or even 2 years ago at this point. I have to go back and look, but it's now out on Game Pass, and it's in that same type of kind of cartoony but deep baseball. So not necessarily a simulation, but has a lot of charm and a lot of play to it as well. But yeah, I've played some Madden, playing a franchise with a friend. We loaded in a draft class from this year's actual draft class. Like that somebody, speaking of creator content, that somebody else uploaded files through the Madden share, and you can import different draft classes. So it's been fun to go through all the scouting and drafting at the same time that combine is going on and people are doing mock drafts. And so that part is always nice to have a little bit of parallel with, reading mock drafts in real life and having a sense of who these players are, because I just got done scouting them in my game, has been enjoyable. And that's, the wonder of Game Pass is that there's always something I can drop in and out of a game that when it comes into season now, between MLB The Show and Super Mega Baseball, we've got every sport represented more or less in Game Pass. So there's always the opportunity to dive in and out of seasons or things like that as they ramp up or wrap up throughout the calendar year.
So while we are talking about a couple of games that we've been playing on Game Pass, Xbox Wire has recently posted an article about games that are coming soon to Game Pass. And so this article by Megan Spur over on the Xbox Wired website. Sometimes it doesn't have to be just what's coming soon to Game Pass. Why not have great games both coming soon and available today? We're keeping the ball rolling with games you can play on your PC, Xbox console, or with cloud gaming on the device of your choice. Let's kick off March and get to the games. One of the games coming is Far Changing Tides, which is a beautiful looking game graphically from an indie design perspective. I don't know.
It's a day one release. So.
Okay. All right. I thought this game. There's so many games that are kind of look like this that I've gotten confused with a couple other titles that have released in the past year. So that's good that it's a day one release, because I actually thought it hadn't reviewed well, but I will have to loop back around and check that out. Microsoft, that game coming to Xbox Cloud Gaming, XCG, console and PC. Microsoft Flight Simulator, which has been available on PC and Xbox, will now be playable in the cloud, which means you will be able to access it on older consoles that are... Yeah, you'll be able to access it on older consoles as well as PC, and of course on mobile devices. On PC via the cloud. If you're running a PC that doesn't have, say, a GPU that can handle modern games. Also coming in, I'm not going to necessarily read any of these. The really big, or I'm not necessarily going to read all of these. The really big deal in this announcement that everybody. I don't know that everybody cheered. Lots of people commented on is Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of one of the surprise sleeper hits of last year. That game will be coming to XCG, console, and PC. This is fortuitous for me. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Hold on. You just called a Marvel property game a sleeper hit, right? I think that says, and I'm not sure that I disagree with you because expectations were low, right? Because of Marvel's Avengers, because of other things. But the fact that it's something with that high profile, yeah, right? We're just pleasantly surprised. You and I both love the story of it. So having it out there on Game Pass is excellent.
Yeah, and having just watched the Eternals, the MCU movie, I still call this a sleeper hit, not only because of expectations being low on the game, but it's still the Guardians of the Galaxy property, which I just think in pop culture is still sometimes a questionable premise. Like, it has its fans now that the movie splashed, like who people who are built in that vein of kind of looking for that kind of humor, right? But I don't know that it universally appeals to everyone. And again, it's a you know, as you and I have talked about before, and Tao's a comic book guy too. Like, it's that one Marvel team that even in the comic books, like, isn't really, their storyline isn't really part of like the central Marvel universe kind of thematically, but it constantly weaves back and forth and crosses over. So at any rate, yes. This is fortuitous for me too, because I bought this game on Xbox, I think. But since having gotten rid of my Series S, I was going to have to look at, repurchasing it. So it's nice that it's coming to Game Pass now, and I can play it on PC, and I'll be able to, play it with a lot of advanced tech on higher resolution and refresh screens, and play it that way in HDR.
Yeah, I was excited for this one too, because I wanted to play this game after hearing. This was one game. Usually I don't care about the reviews and stuff, but this was one game I was actually kind of waiting on to hear what people thought about it, just because of Avengers. Even though I did like Avengers, I mean, I still like Avengers, at least the single player. But yeah, this should be a good time. But this is not my Guardians of the Galaxy. If you're a comic book guy, you know what I'm talking about. Game logic. So, and just a little backstory. This is like the newer. I guess, well, sort of new. I guess last 20 years or so.
James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, but even from the comics too, that this is what the Guardians of the Galaxy is right now. At this team, more or less.
You want Drax with the purple cape? Is that what you're telling me?
No, there was a whole different team before this that actually I grew up on, and they actually showed I think pretty much all the team members in the second Guardians movie of that original Guardians. Team, but it's different. But I enjoyed the James Gunn movies too, though. So, but I'm excited for this game to play it eventually.
Yeah. This is not, I guess, what I would think of as kind of the golden age Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Other things that have come with this drop, there's an update on the Xbox app. It's weird. People are kind of, I mean, the marketing and branding around this is kind of a lot of rah-rah, and I'm like, I'm certain this has been in there for quite some time, seems like. But you now have the option on the PC app to dictate what directory the game gets installed to, and there's support for mods as well, which I think is actually the bigger story. I want to say that because I never install it. Since the ballooning size of the Call of Duty game, which balloons like a mortgage in the housing scandal times. I've always, now I reserve my SSDs and my NVMe SSDs for basically for multiplayer competitive games, right? And since I got used to get booted from matches in Rainbow Six, when I realized that was a cultural norm in that ecosystem, if you were the last person loading to get booted from a match, I've reserved my SSD for those types of games, and so I normally always seek an alternative drive other than my C drive to put games on, and Xbox Game Pass has supported that for a while. So I don't know if maybe that was just a feature that was in there kind of in beta, but it wasn't officially announced or released or what. We've got the No Man's Sky Sentinel update and lots of perks, which I never pay attention to. Swiss would be sad to hear that Nier Automata will be leaving Xbox Game Pass here, I think at the end of the month. And DBQ, one of your, I won't call it favorites, but one of your games that you were familiar with, Torchlight 3, will also be leaving as well. So I guess until Tao gets back, I will go on and talk about Boomerang X. So this is kind of an indie title that was released last year in the summer. It's a first-person shooter, technically. For those... Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead. I want to... Yeah, it came out in May. Yeah, it's Devolver Digital, correct?
Yep. So for those of you who are Cold War kids, like we are, grew up in the, or at least experienced some of our childhood in the 80s, if you're familiar with the old sci-fi IP Krull, you will recognize the weapon, which is called a boomerang, but to me it's the glaive. And in a very similar fashion, you have a lot of superpowers associated with the glaive. You could throw the glaive and teleport to it, which makes it very much like maybe it was just plain called the teleporter. I thought it was called something else back in OG Unreal Tournament. Where you could throw a thing out and then hit a button and then you would kind of bamf to that location, which was a nice way to kind of jib enemies, because you could teleport right into the same space they were occupying and blow them to little giblets. So you can use it to teleport. An interesting thing occurred as I was playing through the game and started becoming more familiar with that capability as a real traversal method. At first, I think that because of the way they present it to you, it came across to me as just an obstacle surmounting method, right? It was just kind of, it wasn't a modus to get around a level. It was just, oh, that thing's up high, I have to go get it, right? But I was just kind of ensconced in this notion to be on the ground. But as the game progressed and as they presented different levels to you, and it's a wonderful lesson in level design, because it really causes you in very intuitive and organic ways, very native and organic ways, to kind of force you out of that shell. And once I realized that you could use that ability with the glaive to kind of traverse the level in a modality very akin to Spider-Man, is what it made me think of, then, and you could look across the level to the complete other side of the level and say, oh, I'm going to go get that. And you get to a point where you are comfortable. Having been a person who, scuba dive, used to scuba dive when I was younger, there's a point where you're diving, and then there's a point where you become comfortable diving. And this is very kind of similar to that. Once you can traverse and remain airborne for an extended period of time, and that feels comfortable and natural, you kind of break into like this new phase and vision of like the game that you're participating in. And it's hard. It's not an easy game. The waves that they throw at you we've been talking recently in the last few weeks, with Ali Ali World and with the Souls games and differences in the way people learn. It's something that you're going to have to replay multiple times to get through a wave. As the waves come in, you're given different enemies. They all have different modes of travel, and that is what makes it kind of difficult, because it's difficult there's a rhythm to it. I don't know that it's a constant or deliberate rhythm, but you'll start feeling it as you go through, and you will start traversing through and rolling through enemy targets in terms of airborne. I have to attrite those types of forces. I have to shift to attrite those types of forces. I have to shift my focus to attrite those types of forces. And if I ever let any one of them get out of sync in terms of kind of becoming overwhelming, that's going to become problematic, because if you think about it in kind of a twin-person shooter fashion, and this is another thing that kind of clicked with me, that game is very much a lot about controlling the geometry of the battle and leaving yourself enough maneuver space. And whenever there is too great of a certain type of enemy that is traversing a certain area of the map in a certain modality, and that becomes overwhelming, that escape route in any second in time becomes cut off to you. And from there, it's just going to start, degrading and cascading until, you just get cornered and it's over. You also gain an ability to kind of slow down time, which is huge. So some of the kind of sniper shots that I wind up pulling off as I'm like slowing down time, and then you get to a point where you're able to do that in midair. Like, it's a shame that it's a low graphical quality of game, kind of in that indie style, because like playing that type of game with a different presentation factor would just really make it pop with an additional wow factor. But as it is, it's still a very solid game. It can get frustrating because there are, in like a platformer, it's sometimes difficult for you to land on a given platform. As you go through the levels, you'll get points where there are elevated platforms, aerial platforms, even platforms on the ground. Like there's kind of a jump, but it's a very ineffective jump. So there's no way that you can get up to a platform in really kind of any easy movement modal, right? You're always going to have to throw the glaive, teleport up to it and come back down is the way I find it. The easiest thing to do is to make it a vertical. You can do it horizontally, but that gets really hard because it becomes very easy to overshoot. But other than that, it's really been a wonderful game. I encountered some initial adversity, and there was a point where I was like, "Yep, I'm done with this. This is gonna be my bounce off moment. I'm not sticking with it." There was a point very early in the game where I traversed to a part of the game a part of the map that you're not even really supposed to be able to get to, or I shouldn't have wound up in, and that's just because, when I fell down kind of one of these big Alice in Wonderland rabbit holes, I took off in a certain direction and never even looked behind me to see if I could have gone the opposite way. So that got me turned around, and it was hard for me to figure out. But once I got past that, I started kind of settling into a groove. So DB, on Steam, I saw that this is a game that you've touched before as well.
Yeah, I had heard about it and listened to it on podcasts when it came out in last summer. And then must have been the Thanksgiving sale, somewhere in one of the fall sales on Steam. I picked it up. My son has played it more than I have, but I completely agree with you, right? There is, even just from the little bit that I've played, there's a flow state that has the potential, like when it clicks together, it's really impressive in terms of the kind of gameplay that it is creating. You're right. It has kind of a stylized graphic style, but it does feel like you really you're moving around. Yeah. I like the way you described the lack of jump, because your whole traversal is your ability to kind of upgrade that glaive to give you the ability to like grab it, again and throw it again quickly, so that you can kind of stay in the air or fall and throw it, so that you're not necessarily just teleporting and stopping. That it becomes, and that sense of movement, mastering that sense of movement is hard. It was hard for me because it's also, I don't typically spend day after day after day in a game and kind of stay in that same type of muscle memory where like, oh yeah, this is fun, I'll come back to it in a couple weeks, and I've atrophied all that skill set. And so this is a game that wants you to, the more that you can stay in its zone, the more that you learn the physics of that world. And by doing so, it's done really well. I'd love to see what that developers can do with this idea if they come back to it or expand it, as you were saying, with putting a different graphical style on it or expanding the world. So it's not just kind of this arena based that a lot of the battles end up being.
Yeah, there's one of the other click states that I'll mention, because you hit these as you go through. You hit points where you go, oh, now I get it. Oh, now I'm comfortable. Is you'll be able to tell when you hit that. One of the points you'll be able to tell when you've like ascended to the next level of interaction with the game is when you are able to make mistakes and recover, right? And that's something that I can tell the difference in challenge levels on Ali Ali World when the map is spaced sufficiently for you to be able to make a mistake and recover. But there are some of those maps that are wired so tight that there is no recovery. Like, you make a mistake and you've blown it. Like, you're not going to get to the end of the map because you hit a point where your kinetic energy for maintaining forward and or vertical momentum just gets insufficient and goes away. If you've ever studied aviation and studied combat aviation, right? You know that you start combat. I'll say it this way: you start combat with a inertia value of 100, right? And that inertia value can go up and it can go down, and if in the point of a fight it gets too low, you're just not going to recover and stay in the fight. And Ollie Ollie World is very much like that. In Boomerang X, when you get to a point where you can overshoot a jump like that, I think it was the point where I was getting the needler or maybe the scatter shot, and you're on a bridge and there are some bees scattered out as enemies. I think it's scatter shot. There are bees scattered out as energy, scattered around off the bridge, and there were points in trying to get through that training module that I misjumped and teleported, and so I got off the bridge and was out over empty space. An hour before in the game, I would have done that and I would have been dead. It would have been over. I wouldn't have been, like, I would have panicked. Like, again, I go back to scuba diving, right? And there, you train in scuba diving that there are points where if you panic, you're going to die, right? Like, literally die, right? And you get to a point where you are able to handle emergency situations in a calm, right, by the number, way. And it's kind of that same thing in Boomerang. There's a point in the game where you get somewhere you're not supposed to be and you panic. And then there's a point in the game where you get somewhere you're supposed to be and you just, right? And then you're teleported back onto the bridge. And so, when I hit that point, I was like, oh, okay, this is a click point where, like, I've just ratcheted up to kind of my next level of being comfortable interacting with the game. So it's a pretty, I think one of the things is it's a pretty unusual game in just its approach. There's, like, I can't think of anything. There are things that it's akin to when you realize it, but at face value, it doesn't feel similar to a lot of other things that, that I've played or probably that most people have played. And until you build those relationships and kind of understand the analogs, it's hard. So, good game. Good game. It's been really enjoyable playing it. So, Tal, you want to talk to us about Pokemon Arceus?
Yes. So, well, first let me just say, now that we have this new format, which I really love, like, we're basically doing the GX show all the time. I really haven't been playing much at all these past few months. So if this was last year, I would have been like had something like almost every week, like a new game. But unfortunately, I've been busy, and I'm just by the time I get the game, it's just like I want to do something I could just jump into. So the first game was just obviously not something that I can just jump into for a few seconds, but I jumped back into Pokemon a couple days this past week, and I actually finally got past the first kind of like main big area that you get into or that you start off in, and I'm on to the next area where I'm kind of going through the main storyline now and doing those quests for that. And I want to see if I can actually beat a Pokemon game finally. I got pretty close at Sword and Shield actually. I think I was only maybe like three gym leaders, I think, away from beating that game. Well, beating that game, I just main story when I say beating the game, but hopefully I can get through this one. And I think from what I read, it's not like too terrible, the main story, so I should be able to punch through it. But of course, I'm in a new area, so I got to explore and catch all the Pokemon I can. And there's actually a couple of quests that I was side quests that I had that I was able to do when I first hit that area. So it was pretty cool. And another reason I kind of jumped into it too is they released a new DLC, a free DLC called Daybreak. This past weekend when they're doing the Pokemon Day, Pokemon Presents presentation that they did. They had announced that, and it came out that same day. So it gives you some more quests you could do. There's some more outbreaks, which is basically they're I guess like they're higher powered Pokemon, but they're just regular. Like, let's say it's like a Pikachu, but he's like 2 or 3 times the size of a normal one. So it's an alpha Pokemon. So it's just kind of a more powerful Pokemon that's running around the world. Kind of their equivalent of the Dynamax, I think. Just not as huge, just not as big, but kind of that more powerful Pokemon. And then you can do some more training ground battles and quests through there, and some photography things and balloon challenges, which if you play in the game, you know what a balloon challenge is in there. But there's a bunch of different things that they've added to the game, so I kind of wanted to jump back in. Unfortunately, some of that stuff, or maybe like half of the stuff that's when I was looking through the patch notes, you have to beat the main game first. So I was like, well, I guess I better get to it. So I'm going to try to do that so I can kind of get to that new stuff, but and just kind of see, obviously what else I can do, because I still only have one mount that I kind of got. It's just a ground one, I know there's one that you can fly or you can, go through the water with and stuff like that. So I want to get to those parts too. And then there was something else within the game that I had just seen. I can't remember now, but yeah, I'm just gonna continue going through that. The next title I've been playing, actually, I'm gonna skip the second one first here and jump back to Rocket League for a second. Man, I love Rocket League. This is one of the games where I can just jump in, play. It's like, at least on like Switch and on consoles, it's like 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. Depends if you go in overtime and stuff like that. But you can just jump in, play a few rounds, and then you're done. This is one of the few games, along with Fortnite, that I usually buy the Battle Pass for, because I just roll over the money that you get, or the in-game currency, and kind of just buy the Battle Pass through that. I've only had to buy it one time, and I've just been buying it. I think for the past three or four seasons now. You just get the unlockables, cosmetic stuff. But I mean, it's just a great game. When I first heard about this game, I thought it was like, oh, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But it pulled me in, kind of just like Minecraft did back in the day, where I just thought it was like, it's kind of silly. But once you actually play it, or once I played it, it kind of pulled me in, and I enjoyed it. And I most of the time I play online. Actually, probably 99% of play online. There is some like single player tournaments you can do. And obviously like exhibition games if you're just trying to practice and stuff. But usually if I don't have like an internet connection or something, I'll jump into those. But I just love, playing against people and with people, and just like any other game. Except for the Switch, because obviously there's no voice chat, or at least like in-game voice chat. But like on Xbox, like no one ever talks. Like I rarely ever hear anybody talk in Rocket League. Probably because they're in a party, which is fine. But it's sometimes you hit those groups, and now they added the ability where you can party up. There's a button there at the end of the match where you can say, hey, let's party up. So that happens a lot too. So that's pretty cool that you can just jump in with people you actually gelled with, and keep going. So that's kind of nice. And then the mobile version I really like too. Which the one nice thing with the mobile version, both versions, when you play one, you actually kind of get an experience boost on the other. So if I'm playing the mobile version, when I jump to the console one, I get like 1,000 XP extra. And I think you can only do it like a few times a week or something, but it's kind of nice to get that extra bump in XP. That kind of helps me with the Rocket Pass, I should say.
Now,
Battle Pass.
Is that a new implementation that's come along? Because I remember when you played, I think the beta, or maybe just first got into this, that was a question that I asked, and you either weren't sure or they hadn't made any indication that there would be any knock-on effect and benefit from you playing mobile. Because one of the things that I find a little bit frustrating is I slap in Call of Duty Mobile. I don't know why, but in a game where like I'm constantly like, the winner and have the highest KD ratio, you get 0 credit from Call of Duty Mobile, into Call of Duty on console or PC. So, is this something that's come along, or has it been there the whole time?
No, yeah, they started that with the official first season, the season 1 that they started with on the mobile. Yeah, so that was actually pretty nice. I was kind of glad, because otherwise, like the mobile version is. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, otherwise, why would you buy 2 battle passes, right? Because the battle passes are separate, aren't they?
Yeah, they're separate, and it's free on the mobile, which is nice. Which I'm kind of still surprised. There's no monetization as far as I could tell, like at all.
I thought there's no battle pass on the mobile version.
There's a battle pass, but it's totally free. You just have it.
There's no paid tier, basically.
Right. Yeah, there's no paid tier. So and the mobile version only goes up to 50, I think, and I think it only runs for like maybe 2 months, or maybe a month and a half. And like console one, they run for about 3 months, I believe, like a quarter, or basically like a 3 month span. But yeah, there's no monetization, and so it's like, well, I mean, I kind of like that, where I get it, I'm getting stuff for free, but it's kind of nice. But I kind of like to work for it too sometimes. But it's nice that you get that XP boost, which is another reason that I want to play. So. And I thought, there is in-game currency on the mobile side too, that you get every so many levels, or if you do the challenges, there's daily and weekly seasonal challenges too. And you get the money most of the time. You get the money from the challenges, and a little bit when you're playing through the battle pass. And I thought for sure, and I could have sworn actually, even in the beta, I had saw somewhere where you can actually pay, to get that in-game money, but I couldn't find it again, or I don't know. Maybe it was just I thought I had seen it, so I don't know. It's just weird that like everything's free in that game on the mobile side. So I don't know if that'll change eventually, but I mean, and I'm kind of the opposite on this one. On the mobile version, I'm okay. I'm a lot better on the console version. So, and it's a different beast on the mobile version because it's just a side scrolling or side to side motion or animation. So there's no 3D environment. So, but it's still fun. I still enjoy it. That's like, and like I said, that's like for mobile side, it's like 3 to 4 minutes, like a match. So it's like half the time of a regular, console Rocket League or PC Rocket League match. So, but that's one game. That's like my new Call of Duty, basically. Like that's one game I'll go back to at like almost all the time, and I'll play it at least once a day or so. So and even on I got on the Switch, so it's even better. So that's on that's mobile too. So and then finally the third game, which I've recently got back into the last couple of weeks, is Apex Legends, and I'm playing this on the Xbox. So I'm both my Xbox One and Xbox One X and Xbox Series X. And I don't know what happened, but I'm like obsessed with this game all of a sudden. Like anytime I get to play something, like I have more than an hour or so to play, like I'll play Apex Legends, and I have a friend. Well, actually, a friend of a friend. A friend that I met through another friend. That he'll jump on every once in a while too. And I've actually been winning matches lately, which that's probably another reason why I kind of like dropped off of it. So, and there's like, there's like 20 legends now or something like that. And they got a lot of characters in here. Like it's almost like an Overwatch where there's like us, a bunch of characters that you could choose from. They all have, well, I shouldn't say different abilities. Some of them are kind of similar, but different enough. Then it's like, okay, it's kind of, I don't mind playing this guy or this woman, over this other one. So, but yeah, I've been diving into that. They just finished what was the anniversary last weekend, which had the control mode. I think I talked about that last week, and that's gone now. That was just a limited time mode, which is kind of sad because I kind of like that mode. It's kind of nice. They have the arena mode, which is the other non-battle royal, where you don't spawn in that one either, but you just play. It's 3-on-3, and then it's the best out of 5, I believe. So you got to win at least 3 matches. And then you die, and then you can still get picked up, kind of like in the battle royal. But I mean, it's the arenas are it's a small like piece of the map of the regular maps that they have in the battle royal. So I mean, I don't think I've ever gotten picked up from in an arena match just because it's like too fast. It moves way too fast for that. It's almost like a Call of Duty, like a regular multiplayer game in that respect, which is kind of nice, just without the respawns. So
well, that might actually provide me an entry path to play that game then, because the battle royale loop is just too long for me. So those matches do go faster and wind up quicker. They're like 5 to 10 minute matches.
Yeah. So yeah, it's super quick. So you're done. And there's still there's still the storm, but like I said, you're in such a small arena or a small map that it doesn't even matter. So I don't think I've ever seen it get to the smallest storm that I could get to in an arena match. So yeah, but it's pretty fun. So
so I don't know, because I know you said you don't care as much for the multiplayer on Call of Duty anymore. Have you played the gunfight modes on Call of Duty? So the 3v3 maps, like Ukraine, like the nuclear map, or like I can't remember the names of the maps now because I haven't played for so long. But they're really small tactical maps for just 3-on-3. Mm-hmm. They're kind of like maybe they're even a little bit smaller than Rust. There's like the Kremlin library and things like that. So I was just wondering if, from a scale perspective, if they were.
Yeah, I don't think I ever played those 3-on-3 matches. Yeah, I always just played the normal. What is it, 5-on-5 or 6-on-6 or whatever the normal matches are. No normal death matches. Yeah, no, I don't think I ever played those ones.
Okay. Well,
it sounds like maybe they borrowed it from that, because it seems like every game's borrowed from another game lately, especially right. Apex and Fortnite and everything. So
yeah.
So while we're talking about Apex, let's hit a news story that Apex Legend Mobile is doing a soft launch next week, March 7th. Oh, so not worldwide, but Australia, Singapore, Philippines, Mexico, Argentina, New Zealand, Malaysia, Indonesia, South America. So, but it's also there are, if you're on Android, there's some apps out there that give you a chance to kind of launch in through some of those territories as well. So one of the ways that I've been playing the closed beta for Torchlight mobile, Torchlight Infinite, I believe, is the mobile game, is through TapTap, which is there's an app out there for it on Android. But yes, there's other ways to get mobile games from other territories running on your Android device.
Yeah, I forgot they were making a mobile game. I don't remember. Is that like full on Apex, like the console version, PC
I
version?
think so. From looking at the pre-registration screen on TapTap, that it looks pretty much. I mean, it looks like the Call of Duty mobile for Apex Legends. It's got your set of characters. Whether or not they'll start with the full roster or they'll start way back at the initial roster. It'll be interesting to see and how that plays.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was going to be separate, like a separate thing. Because I think it'll be
the
only game that I know of is Fortnite that ever had like them all intermingled.
I'm pretty sure, at least from what I've read about it, that it's its own separate. Just like Game Logic was saying, he's great at Call of Duty mobile, right? That it's running in its own. It's walled off.
Right. Okay. All right.
So DBQ with the sneaker news story, but also with indications of chicanery in order to gain access to a game not released in our territory. The other thing that I've been playing is I had a very brief episode because I've been changing stuff around in the studio, and I thought I had set up one system where I was going to play some racing games, legacy racing games. I had to swerve away from that, but while I was doing that, I pulled down Dirt Rally, the original Dirt Rally that was released, I think, in holiday of 2015, and went back to play some Forza Horizon 4. The interesting thing about Dirt Rally is, in this span of time where, once again, gaming difficulty has kind of become like a big discussion topic in social media, one thing, and Gran Turismo 7 is about to drop, one thing that's been very interesting that I've noticed before but hadn't really strung together as a discussion topic was that, over these last 10 years or so, like the notion of difficulty levels, like in racing games, you used to be able to pick like easy, medium, hard. In most racing games today, there is no difficulty level, right? You pick your assists and the game is just what it is. And Dirt Rally is one of those series that's, again, kind of just hard from a racing game perspective. I mean, they are simulations. They cut a lot closer to that skin. Some of these courses, some of these stages are like really technically difficult. And WRC is actually even more difficult in the last couple of iterations, in my opinion. But I was reminded of that as I started my career over in Dirt Rally in my little Mini Cooper, and I was like, you just need to be willing and ready to just accept that this is a hard climb, right, to get back up on this horse, the way the game starts you off. So that was interesting. I was also impressed that the game still looks graphically pretty impressive, for its age. The interesting thing about Forza Horizon 4 was I went back, and it turns out that I wasn't going back for that long because shortly after reloading it and getting back into it, I bought Edinburgh Castle and then played a few more events and then hit the point where I had done everything in the game. There were challenge events and stuff like that, but I had essentially run the entirety of the map in the event types that I care about, because I only really care about the races. I don't really care about the experience board breakers and the stoplight speed race, all that kind of stuff. But then for a short amount of time afterwards, I did play some of those, like the Forzathon challenges and the seasonal challenges and things like that. Before then I hit that point where I was like, okay, I'll keep this loaded and I'll kind of pick at it, but I'm kind of done with, career progression in this game. So I was happy to kind of loop back and knock out those last couple of events. Got a few remaining Chivos that there were still to be farmed there for, finishing up those last few races and whatnot. But good times. What I was driven to consider is, one of the things that I eventually want to write about and maybe talk about on a podcast too is, games as a service is not a genre, right? Like, implementing a game as a service does not inherently mean that there are things that game can't do from a narrative perspective, from a game design perspective, right? Any game and any genre can be fitted into that mold. That mold is nothing but a progression system mold. And so one of the things that I was driven to consider is, as we look at, what Halo Infinite is going to try and do, which I think is a progression of the concepts that were really started under Anthem, which is to take the game engine and the world and establish that as kind of infrastructure as code, and then to be able to basically containerize the narratives, right, and deploy those so that you always kind of have the background infrastructure of the world, and then you can just build your narrative in a separate deployment mechanism and push it out. It would be really neat to have all of the Forzas, or for Forza to shift to this thing where there's Forza Horizons, right? And then they just periodically just push out a new module for a given setting. Like, it would be really awesome to just have, Australia, Great Britain, and Mexico all in one game in Forza Horizon, and just let you keep the same career, the same garage, the same tunes for all your cars, and just go around the world to different locales. And I know that there are a lot of people who dislike the games as a service kind of model, but I think it has its place, and I think it has the games that it suits, and Forza Horizon to me would be one of them. Like, I don't know that I need an entirely new Forza Horizon package like every single year or 2 years. Like, just let me keep my career and let me be persistent. Let me own that persona. Like, I don't need to redesign my character every couple of years. Like, just let me have my same guy in the same wardrobe and be able to mix and match however I want to in the same cars. And let me just take them all over the world and participate in a new Forza festival, Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that especially now that it's on Game Pass, that seems a much more logical model to be able to make sustainable, because it is on a Game Pass and it's not dependent on box sales. But even something that repackaged them, I mean, for more or less 4 and 5 are running in the same engine, that pulling them into some type of hub would seem possible. The infrastructure of that and the file size of it would be a whole different thing. But right, that would be a fun idea, to be able to jump back and forth and kind of keep that progression building.
Yeah. Associated news story, just because I've been playing a bunch of driving games. Twisted Metal has a TV series that's going to be starring Anthony Mackie. I really only put this on the rundown because Anthony Mackie's he's my man. That guy, I really love his character Falcon. For such an undersung character in the Marvel universe to occupy such a place of gravitas within the MCU film series, I think is just really, really amazing. And I think and God rest his soul, I love what Chadwick brought to the MCU. But sometimes I think that all of that kind of overshadows what Anthony Mackie has done and leads to him being undersung. What he has done within the MCU, I think, is really amazing. So he's going to get an opportunity to do another series. At first, when I saw this, I was like, man, he's going to... And yes, this is a slight segue from the gaming discussion. It's tangentially related. I was like, man, he's does this mean he's not going to be doing the Marvel movies, or he's not going to get as much airtime or whatever? But then I remember, he did do... What was the sci-fi series on Netflix? Altered Carbon? He's done other projects in between the MCU movie. So he's going to be in the show Twisted Metal. This article on Variety magazine, which is a website which never features prominently in our news rundown. But this story from Joe Otterson, the Twisted Metal TV show has landed on Peacock with a series order. Variety has learned. As previously announced, Anthony Mackie will star in and executive produce the series, which is based on the video game franchise of the same name. The show was first reported as being in development back in February 2021. So look, all these CEOs are running around talking about the metaverse. It's really not that complicated a concept. Fortnite has done it. It's really about, as we saw this week with Epic Games buying Bandcamp, it's really about taking IP and deploying them in multiple content and entertainment vectors such that they could be monetized. Right? I hate to put it that way, but look, it's just a way for you, if you participate in an environment, for you to carry that persona and that, again, persistent progression around to multiple entertainment venues. And, you know, this is one, and it's one that's been going on for quite some time, and it's where, you know, when it's tied together, right? So if things that we see in Twisted Metal work their way into the game and or vice versa, that's kind of a metaverse play, right? When we talk about, you know, the MCU now bridges this gap between comic books and movies, and we see back and forth of interrelated events occurring and maintenance of the continuity, right? Or at least, you know, replication of the continuity with some degree of variance, right? That's a metaverse play. And so, you know, as gaming properties become marquee and become, you know, great things for companies to own, I hate to put it that way, and, you know, become a significant profit wedge, right, for larger corporations, these plays become more important. It's kind of gone beyond what it was in the 80s and 90s, where a video game property as a movie or TV show was a neat novelty. You know, now I think they're actually important. And they're also harbingers of, you know, I mean, this, I think in my mind, is directly associated with the fact that there is a new Twisted Metal game being worked on. You know, and it'll give us some more Anthony Mackie airtime, which I'm always a proponent of. So, I don't know. Any of you guys planning on checking this out? I'm not a Peacock person, so
$4.99 a month. Yep. No, I have come in and out of Peacock. So depending on the series, I'll pick it up. It's easy. Like, wait until a series has run and then pick it up for a month and kind of burn through it. But yeah, I'm not a big Twisted Metal fan in terms of the franchise, but I appreciate Anthony Mackie as well, right? Even kind of his Redbox B movies of Synchronic or whatever it was, he's still solid in it. So, yep.
Yeah, I really liked when it was a Twisted Metal Black on the PlayStation 2, which kind of was built in this mold to me of kind of the Mortal, the reason I love the most recent Mortal Kombat is because you can play those games and you kind of get a movie, right, in the cutscenes, right? I mean, and there's YouTube videos that take all those cutscenes and string them all together, but you get, in my mind, a fairly robust story told in the course of those cutscenes if you play the campaign of those games, and not a totally horrible movie either, right? You know, and I played the entirety of Mortal Kombat 11 and then, you know, even started on the expansion DLC just for that reason. And I don't know that I would have stuck with a fighting game all the way through, you know, for solely, you know, without that glue being there. Twisted Metal Black did a lot of the same thing. You got a lot of the story in the background of the characters in, you know, a very early rendition of that mold. And so, you know, if that same type of storytelling and narrative is kind of going to be the content of this TV show, then it looks... It looks interesting. Even though this is being talked about as a comedy, I guess my hope would be it would kind of be a dark comedy. So, which it would have to be if it, I would think
it would have to be for Twisted Metal, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. But there we go. Anything that you guys have on your play slates coming up that you're planning on doing for the turn after the show?
I'm going to real quick. I kind of started Outriders, and just the very beginning, like I got to not even to the past the first tutorial section, and I actually have to start that over now because I didn't get far enough when I stopped playing, so I didn't save, so I gotta do that over again. So I did that through the xCloud, just through the streaming through the actual on my Xbox One X, it's just streaming, so it's kind of nice that I can just jump into a game without having to download it and stuff like that. And it looked fine. There's a little bit of artifacting here and there when I was playing, but it should be fine though. I think it kind of just noticed it at the beginning, mostly like in the space scenes, because you see like the all black background, you kind of see like a little bit of artifacting. But once I got onto the planet and I didn't notice it, or I didn't see it, or I just didn't notice it, just because you got colors, there's vibrant colors everywhere on that planet you land on. So maybe I just didn't notice as much. So I'm gonna try to plug through that more, and then try to get back to Horizon Zero Dawn, because I haven't played that at all this past week. So I want to get back into that, definitely.
Very cool. Going back to the comment that DBQ mentioned earlier, I have built, I've got a new PC or two, new configuration in the studio, so I plan on taking one of those for a more robust test spin by finally getting back into Destiny 2 on PC. That brings us across an adjacent news story that we saw run this week. Why is Bungie banning Destiny 2 players on the Steam Deck? This article over on Steam World by Michael Kreider. The developer says it will automatically ban Destiny 2 players who try to launch the game on the Steam Deck's native Steam OS. The Steam Deck runs Valve's Steam OS, a gaming-focused Linux-based operating system, but it's also designed to run the vast majority of PC games, including those made for Windows, with the help of its Wine-style Proton compatibility layer. According to the company's initial testing, about 80 to 90% of the games on Steam can be played on the Steam Deck. So why is it that Bungie has declared that it will ban anyone playing its online shooter Destiny 2 on the Steam Deck? Tao posted this article in the newsroom, and this brings some interesting things to the fore. My speculation is just based on the way that I saw the narrative being displayed. I don't know that enabling games to run on the Steam Deck via the Proton compatibility layer on Linux, I don't know that was a discussion with developers and publishers as much as we're going to do this. It's part of what you agreed to by selling your game through the store, and we'll keep you informed on how it's going. And if you want to participate, you can, but this is what we're doing. Because nowhere in here, that I've seen, since this has been announced, I haven't seen like a developer or a publisher come out and say, hey, all of our games are going to be deliberately coded to run on Steam Deck, right? All of our games in the future are going to be, it's all been a matter of developers and publishers are doing what they always do if they build a Linux version of the game, and anything about it running on Steam Deck has all been Valve, which leads me to believe, because I haven't seen evidence of like any collaborative discussions between multiple parties, leads me to believe that there haven't been any. And so what this sounds like to me is, again, the same thing that I would do if I'd sold my software to somebody and somebody said, hey, we're going to modify your software to do something that you didn't sell it to us to do, then I wouldn't be committed to like providing support for it. And in this case, where I could definitely see from a technical perspective where it would cut across what I might be looking at doing from an anti-cheat perspective, I think that's what gets you this result. I don't know. Did you guys have any thoughts on?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was coming at it with as well. Like, one, they've already come out in the past and talked about it not running in Linux. And I did wonder if it is related to the anti-cheat software that they install, that they, you get running every time that you're playing. And that started last year at some point. And so whether that is either not necessarily compatible as well, or that there's potential exploits in it that would allow some workarounds for that, that might be it. Or it simply may just be that they didn't get consulted before this conversation happened, and before this happened. And yeah, so either way, I can see, I'm kind of disappointed as somebody who played Destiny, the original Destiny remote play on his Vita from PlayStation 4, because it was a good way to do patrols. The Steam Deck would have been really fun to do that, but from the publisher perspective, I can completely see where they come down on this.
Tao, any thoughts?
No, I mean, the initial reason that I put that on there was just like, and you kind of explained it. I was like, why? Why? What's the point? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still don't get the Steam Deck just in general. Like I don't understand it. But I mean, I know what it is, and obviously all that. I don't know why you'd want it, but just people seem to be going crazy about it. At least online, when I've been seeing it on talking about it on on forums and stuff like that and other Discords. It's like, okay, like yeah, I mean everyone's like, hey, it's better than Switch. Well, I'm like, yeah, it's better than Switch. It's PC. I mean, of course it is, but I just don't get it. Like for me, with how I have problems playing games on Switch when I'm playing handheld, depending on what like shooters and stuff like that. It's like I wouldn't want to play like most of the games that I have on Steam right now on that. So, but as far as Destiny 2, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like they don't want to, you don't want to be messing with the files and stuff like that on the system itself. So I mean, so that's fine. Not a big deal to me.
Yeah, and this is one of the cautionary tales that I put out, when this thing was first announced. And I'm the same way as you, Tal. I've seen a lot of rah-rah and a lot of fervor around the platform, and I'm like, I don't really know what you guys are basing that on. But this is one of the things I mentioned, which is that, like, right, it's not Windows, right? So there are things that it can do, and there are some things that it won't be able to do. And then people go, oh, well, it can do whatever. I'm like, no, it cannot do that. You can make it do that, but that's your effort and your tinkering. And when it goes bad, right, because you fail to follow a step or because some set of instructions that somebody posted online isn't 100% of the steps, and that will happen. From being somebody who has torn apart their Android devices, right, and slipstreamed different operating systems on them, I saw, one guy I was engaged in I'm not sure I would call it a conversation, but in an exchange with, said, oh, well, it'll be fine. They'll just watch a YouTube video and it will just work. I'm like, the hell it will. Like, it will for some people, and then there's going to be a chunk of people who do it and wind up bricking their systems, right, and are going to have to rebuild them. And that's going to be something that they have to learn, right? There are people who have some native skill sets who are able to do these things and are accustomed to the adversity you encounter when you do them. And oh, by the way, are also accustomed to, I was planning on going to bed at 2 a.m. this morning, but I got to troubleshoot this thing, and me pulling an all-nighter is just par for the course. There are some people who don't live that life, right? And so people buying a Steam Deck expecting to get a Nintendo Switch experience, that's not what they're going to get. And it's not going to be a universally pliable device for every type of user. And so there are going to be users who are going to get this thing who aren't going to be able to run the Epic Game Store, who aren't going to be able to run Destiny 2, who aren't going to be able to run some of these things that require you to get in there and tinker with without that exacting a pretty high price, right? So, and here we have an instance where, not only do you have to finagle with the thing to get it to do something, but that publisher is saying, we don't want you to do that, and we're not going to support it, and we're actually going to do something consequential to you should you attempt it. So, it's going to be an interesting state of affairs, and it's going to spawn a lot of, with a publisher like this, it's going to spawn kind of what we used to see with iOS and the jailbreaking, right? It's going to be, I jailbreak it, Apple patches it, I jailbreak it, Apple patches it. Now you get to the point where, I mean, jailbreaking is not really a thing anymore, right? I mean, you periodically hear about it, but realistically, like, people have decided, like, it's not worth the effort. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes on. It also begets the question, and DBQ, you've pre-ordered one, is that correct?
I have pre-ordered the opportunity to purchase one.
Right, as if I. But this whole conversation also begets I think what will be some interesting banter in what do you play on the Steam Deck in mobile mode. Because as you mentioned, Tal, and you and I have talked about, well, what do you play on the Switch? And I've said, well, when I play on the Switch, when I take the Switch on the go, I don't play with those blasted Joy-Cons hooked onto the side of the stinking thing, right? I always took my Pro Controller with me and always put it kind of in easel mode on a tabletop. 90% of the time. Back in the day, the few opportunities that I had to take it on a plane flight, when I did play in mobile mode, I played like racing games, right? But I don't know that I would play a first-person shooter in mobile mode, right, with the wingtip controllers. and I will probably play the Steam Deck with a controller. You know, it's got a bigger screen and it's a larger device overall, so that will hopefully be a little more pleasant, particularly for my visual acuity when things are in close. But it invites that question, like, what does it make sense for you to play on the go versus what does it make sense for you to play when you're docked? And those two things may not be synonymous scenarios. And so it'll be interesting to see how people approach it, and DBQ for you and I to talk back and forth about, you know, what makes sense for both of us.
I can't remember. Did it have a touchscreen? The Steam Deck?
I don't think it has a touchscreen.
I don't think so. It has a touch pad or some. I mean, there are some tactile touch surfaces.
I was just wondering.
Yeah, that's how I recall it.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen. Anything else that we need to go over? All right. Coming up, we moved to Picks Plays. We're only going to talk about those once a month. So you're going to get the assignment at the top of the month, which this is, it being March 3rd. And then you're going to have a month to complete the assignment before we talk about it. So the next Picks Plays assignment is as follows. With the rumors and news around Call of Duty taking 2023 off and a third Pokemon game coming within 12 months, what other games or series should consider taking a break or giving a franchise time to breathe? Alternatively, what series took a break and came back inspired? Play a game that touches on these topics and discuss why a break would be beneficial or why a pause reset was helpful creatively. None of us have plunked our poker chips down on what we plan on playing. There's an argument that, you know, for me, you know, that time that I plan on spending in Destiny 2 could be part of that discussion, as Bungie will be shifting to Sony ownership, and we all speculate on what that means for the Destiny franchise. DBQ, Tao, any thoughts that you all have about what to play for this game?
I was actually thinking of maybe Madden 22, so not it's on Game Pass, and something that probably should take a break, but probably never will. I mean, obviously it never will because it's always going to be annualized. But you brought up a good point, and it's something I was thinking about. And you know, people have mentioned this before too. With Forza, was just doing the same thing with Madden. You know, like why bring it out every year? We could just throw it out there and then, you know, just update it when you can. So that was just kind of my thinking on that series.
Well, and in Madden, there's been talk within the community of kind of spinning out Ultimate Team and just making that free to play because of the amount of money that it generates anyways.
Yeah. Any ideas?
Now when you're talking about Madden, now I'm thinking about NBA Live, like Live 19 since it died. But actually, before I put my poker chip down on where I'm playing, I'd want to make a correction that yes, the Steam Deck does have a touchscreen. So I looked it up real quick. Yes. Which makes sense probably at this point because the touchscreen is price-wise not drastically different than a non-compact capacitive touch.
Does it come with a reactive stylus also?
Ooh. No, but you can order one through your Valve points.
Like I don't know. It seems kind of, I don't know. Maybe that's not weird. I don't know. I'll have to take another look at the screen. Like, I don't know.
I was thinking of that maybe for like RTSs. Like you could pinch and zoom and, you know, kind of use it as a mouse and select unit. Maybe.
But it won't.
You can do that.
But it won't matter unless Valve implements that control scheme, right? Or unless they go back to the original developer or publisher to do it. Like I said,
or is the touchscreen simply just, you know, the equivalent of a mouse press, right? Like it can launch things and select things, but it isn't necessarily going to be, you know. Although I'm going to come back to the top of the show talking about Voice of Cards, Forbidden Maiden, that playing that on a touchscreen with a fast loading time would be a great use of that. Granted, not $500 worth of or $300 worth of, but I could definitely see the types. You know, Slay the Spire. There's a number of different gameplay options that would be functional within that.
But back when I was playing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was gonna say back when I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh on the Switch, I switched to using the touchscreen because you can use the touchscreen on that game, the new Yu-Gi-Oh game that came out, the card battle game. Because it was way easier than trying to flip through all the different screens and that you go through for that game. So,
but I feel like your first scenario, I feel like would be the more likely one, DBQ, because we have gotten reports that I think they're deprecating the Steam big screen mode, and that they are absorbing that into essentially what is trunk for the new Steam Deck UI, and that makes sense to me that would an inherent byproduct of that would be that there would be touchscreen controls enabled for UI and operating system navigation, and then when you cut to the game, it would be like the regular controls. But we will see. It'll be interesting. All right, next week we will be back for episode... Is next week episode 231? No, next week is episode 232.
This week was episode 231, yeah.
Yes, but I updated the next week's thing for episode 231. That's my notation in the agenda, so that you can see what episode we're on and whether or not that little blurb at the bottom has been updated for that episode. So anyway, next week, episode 232, DBQ Hams will be hosting, and we will all be back on as we are under the new format. So until then, take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Come here to talk about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic here with my co-host DBQ Hams and Tommaster99. Until next week, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.